welcome back to the Launch School podcast. I am here with Nick Perry, a current student. Hi, Nick.
Hola.
How you doing today?
I'm doing very well. How you doing?
Good. Welcome. Thanks for spending some time to chat with us this season. It's been really nice to just hear from some current students, kind of to bridge that gap between being at the very beginning of the curriculum or not having started yet and wondering, like, how could I possibly make it to, the capstone graduates that we hear from. So hearing from someone in the middle is kind of nice, like middle step in there to get some perspective. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, like how you found Launch School, why you're here, what you're doing?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with how I found it. And this might tie into why I'm here as well. So I found Launch School because I was looking into a career switch. And originally I was thinking of going back to school. And there were two options that came to mind. I was thinking of going into more of the IT side of things or getting into software engineering. And I was kind of bouncing back and forth between the idea of the two. And I actually talked to a friend of mine who works as a software engineer, and I sought out his opinion. And I asked him, what do you think? You're a software engineer. You know guys in the tech field as well. What's your opinion on what do you think I should pursue? And he said with IT, it's probably a little bit easier to get into, but with software engineering, while it's harder, the ceiling is much higher, and you can take it a lot farther. And he can't speak more highly of his work. He loves it. He loves his work-life balance. Loves everything about it. Every time I talk to him, he can't say more than enough good things about how much he enjoys it. So I thought I'd give it a shot. And from there, I started looking into different programs. I didn't want to go back to like university setting. I didn't like the idea of doing a 4-year degree, in computer sciences. So I was looking into different things like boot camps and whatnot. And as I was going through, a couple of Reddit threads, I found Launch School and I found their subreddit. And from there, I checked out the website and started looking into it a little bit more. And I really fell in love with their overall pedagogy. Talking about the path to mastery, the slow path to learning. And it really, really spoke out to me. And I noticed that they did a free prep course. And so I thought, well, why not? It's free. If I don't like it, I mostly invested with some time. Let's give it a shot. And so I went through the prep course, and I think that took me about 2 or 3 months. I was taking it a little bit slower, and I think that was April of 2022 when I started it. And yeah, after going through the prep course, I was hooked. I loved the way they, taught everything, the way they presented the information. I loved the use of examples and how they encouraged us to go along with the coding examples and play along with it. I thought it was all fantastic. And so I took a month off because I got married the August of that year and had a bunch of family and friends in town. So I took the month off and then jumped into core that September. And yeah, ever since I've just been hooked. I love it. It's been a wild but very, very fun ride so far.
Awesome. Where are you at in the curriculum now? You're in the front end, right?
Yeah, I just started the front end. I'm in the second course, LS216. I'm actually preparing for the interview assessment for that right now. Hopefully going to take it pretty soon here. And yeah, it's been fun. JavaScript is definitely an interesting language.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, you're more than halfway through. How does that feel? Like, if you look back at where you started versus where you're at now, do you think that there's any insight in how you've changed, like not just technically, but also like as a person?
Yeah, it honestly feels a little bit surreal. I feel like I'm much more confident in myself at this point than I was when I started. And it's also like surreal because I have one coding language under my belt now. We learned Ruby. Obviously not like, I don't consider myself Rubyist. I'm not a master at it, but I felt pretty proficient at it by the time I finished the back end. And now I'm learning JavaScript. And to me, it's crazy to me to think about because I remember when I first started learning Ruby and just, coding in general, it was tough, and it came with its hurdles, but very, very fun. And to go from those feelings of like, wow, this is tough. I'm not sure if I can do this. I've never done anything like this before. To, wow, now I'm learning my second language. I'm moving on to the front end portion, and I picked up JavaScript, fairly quickly. Again, not to mastery, but enough to be, fairly proficient at it. It's just crazy to think about that. That was what, a year and a half ago, maybe I started to get to this point, and yeah, 'cause I didn't think I'd be able to do it when I first started. So, to kind of prove myself wrong again,
Hmm.
it's pretty surreal.
Well, and before we go into kind of like your experiences at the beginning of the curriculum, just a little bit more background on you. You're working full time, right?
Yes, yeah, I'm working full time, 4 days a week, but 12-hour shifts except for Wednesdays. Those are my short day, only 6 hours, and then get Friday, Saturday, Sunday off.
So when do you study? Do you just study on your 3 days off?
I make time to study during the week as well. So typically I won't start work until a bit later in the day. So I work from 11 a.m. until 11 p.m.
Mm.
And I'll typically make some time early in the morning. So I'll get up at 7 or 8, depending on how well rested I feel. And I'll make a couple hours study time in the morning. Thankfully, with my job, I do have some downtime at some points during the day where I can put in another hour or two. And that really helps. And then during my days off, that's when I hammer out probably the most of my study time. Fridays, I could put in probably 5, 6 hours, maybe more if it's split up. And then Saturday, Sundays, you should probably another 3 or 4.
So not definitely a part-time student, but was feeling like you weren't going to be able to do this, you mentioned that. Was that more about like your abilities as a person to pick up technical topics, or was that more about like the time that you have available to commit?
I think it was more so to do with my abilities and capabilities as a person, and not so much the time. I wasn't concerned about not being able to put in the time. Uh, I think self discipline was an issue for me as well. In the past, I wasn't a fantastic student. I'd probably actually say I was a pretty terrible one.
Mm.
Terrible study habits, terrible self discipline, and pushing myself to study every day. So that was a big concern for me as well. But I really took this as a challenge to challenge myself and prove to myself that hey, you're not such a bad student after all. And just give it a shot.
That's great.
Worst you can do is not make it, right? If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. There's other things out there, and just figured, give it a shot. What's the worst can happen? Worst can happen, you have to find something else. Best that can happen is you get a career in software engineering and something that you really like. So far so
Yeah.
good.
You could have fooled me. I mean, making it to the front end curriculum in, I think you said like a year and a half while working a full-time job. That's pretty impressive. That seems like you've definitely turned the tables on self-discipline.
Thank you.
So I
Yeah,
want to talk about,
it was tough to do. It's easier now that I've established, different habits. But at the beginning, it was definitely a shock, like jumping into cold water, something like that.
yeah. Let's talk about your experience at the beginning of the curriculum. So, when I reached out to students, of course, I was just interested in hearing about people's unique experiences. And one of the things that I think people really like to hear about that people aren't always willing to talk about is receiving a not yet on an assessment or not passing an assessment. And you said that you'd be happy to talk about your experience. So, do you want to tell us about your not yet, what happened, which assessment it was on, and why you think it happened?
Yeah, so I got my not yet on the RB 109 interview assessment. I think it was actually with you. Yeah, and as to why it happened, I don't know. I felt like I prepared really, really well for that assessment. I studied a lot. I went to a ton of spot sessions, did a lot of coding, like live coding practice in front of other students, in front of spot leads. I attended TA led study sessions. And I think the biggest factor was just not knowing what to expect with the first
Mhm.
interview assessment. I wasn't taking into account how nervous I would feel. And I think what happened was, when I look back on it, is I was so nervous. And I think those nerves weren't coming from a place of feeling unprepared. I think it was, I don't really get test anxiety in the first place. I got that a lot during university when going into exams. And I think all those feelings of being a terrible student, how I struggled in university and how I struggled with exams back then all kind of resurfaced. And it was hard to kind of like move past that and realize, like, that's in the past. That's not who you are anymore.
Mhm.
It just like jacked up my anxiety like crazy. Like, I remember sitting here 5 minutes before the interview time, had my headphones on. Prior to that, I'd gone for a walk. I was hanging out with my dog, just chilling out on the lawn, just doing anything to try and, keep my nerves steady and, keep myself calm. But when it came time to it, man, like, I was sitting here 5 minutes before, headphones on, and all I could hear was just my heart pounding in my chest. It
Mm.
felt like I was like about to like jump out of a plane and go skydiving or something like that. Like, just this crazy level of anxiety for me. And like, 'cause I'm afraid of heights. So that's what I kind of equate
Mm.
that feeling to. And I was just like, man, like, I don't know how I can, chill myself out. My calming music isn't working. These breathing exercises I've like learned aren't working. Hanging out with my dog didn't work. Like, I just can't get my nerves to calm down. And yeah, it was really tough to overcome that. And I remember even reflecting on it after the interview, and I had a good feeling like I didn't pass. Like, I pretty much knew it right off the bat. And
Mhm.
I I just like I figured, like, man, like, I need to figure out a way to overcome these nerves and calm myself down. I think that was the biggest contributor to it. And yeah, it was tough. But I think what ended up happening is the way I handled that was I have a bunch of really good friends here at launch school now. I mean, I've met a ton of real cool people. But at the time, there was a spot lead, and he's a good friend of mine now, Matisse. And I'd done a bunch of spot sessions with him. And he reached out to me the next day after the interview, asked me how it went. And, I told him, man, I'm pretty sure I didn't pass. I told him kind of what happened, how just like I couldn't get over my nerves and just really, really struggled throughout the whole thing. And we met up on the weekend. We had a video call and we discussed it further in depth. And he said, that's unfortunate, but, you reminded me how capable I am and how well I've done on our live coding interviews. And, it's not a matter of skill. Like, it's not a skill issue. It's
Mhm.
you couldn't calm yourself down. Nerves have a real big impact on performance if you can't handle them. It happens. And he was a big part in keeping level headed and keeping my my confidence high. He kind of brought me back
Mhm.
to earth and said, hey, you can do this. Just handle the nerves. You can handle the nerves, like, it's
Mhm.
going to be easy peasy. And it turned out that was the case. I rebooked the interview, as soon as I could. Attended more spot sessions, did more live coding, and the second time around, it was like night and day difference. I remember like just how nervous I was the first time. The second time, I was just thinking of it as, this is just another spot session. This is another study session with a friend. I don't even think I could hear my pulse at that point. So it was it just went much much smoother. And yeah, huge shout out to Matisse. Thank you so much. I know I've thanked you already, but that was a big part in keeping level headed and keeping my confidence high.
That's great. It's so interesting because there's so many flavors of not yet. Like if you're gonna get a not yet, it's like walking up to like an ice cream parlor and like picking which kind. And in the case of, well, first of all, before we go into that, the just to be clear, the 109 that you're talking about is before the split. So um,
Hmm.
you're talking about the 109D, meaning that your first
Mhm.
ever interview at launch school was a technical live coding challenge.
Yep.
So we've
Yep.
remedied that a little bit by splitting it up. So now there's like a much more mellow interview as your first one. And I think that kind of helps with the nerves. But so we're
Mhm.
talking about a technical interview, like coding problem solving challenges. what's interesting is that a lot of people who will struggle with that, will get a not yet, have the skills, just like you're saying, like very few people go in genuinely just not being able to solve the problem. That's kind of its own issue. But for people that have the skills, sometimes it's just that they haven't practiced with other people. But you
Mm.
had coded in front of people and solved a bunch of problems in front of your peers. So you didn't necessarily have just that I'm nervous to code in front of someone. It was just purely the fact that you were being assessed. It wasn't, a lack of having done it in front of people, which is definitely a flavor that we get. It's like, okay, you have to go and do this in front of people. So how did you approach remedying that? Because I don't think just telling yourself to calm down is, an approach. What
Yeah,
did you
yeah.
do to fix that?
Yeah, I just throughout the time in between booking the assessment and actually doing it, I just kept telling myself, like, you're just setting up another day to code with a friend. And I tried to shift that mindset of, a TA, they're marking me, they're assessing me, they're judging me. I really tried to remind myself, hey, they're there to support you. They want you to pass. They don't want you to fail. And the more I reminded myself that, the better it got. And the more I told myself, just treat it like another study session. That's basically, it's almost the exact same, except you just get a mark on it. But don't think about the mark. Just, it's another study session. You're coding in front of someone, and that's it. And I think, the mindset it's really, really important. Because previously, like the previous attempt, all I could think about was how it was being marked, how important it is, how important it is to pass. How like if I don't pass this, I'm not gonna, get into the career I want. And I was putting all this extra pressure on myself, and it just did such a disservice to me. Whereas this one, I just tried to keep myself, much more relaxed, tried to take the pressure off, and think about it in more of a casual way. Like, yeah, I'm getting marked, but you know, trying to push that to the back of my mind. And when I started feeling those feelings of like anxiety again, I actually remember talking to JD Fortune about something, and it was about like the similarity in feelings between excitement and anxiety, and how there's kind of like a line you cross where the excitement turns into those anxious feelings. And he mentioned a book, and I can't remember like the finer details, but essentially it was like if you can convince yourself like those feelings of anxiety are excitement, you can probably it's probably like a much more positive outlook for it. And so I really try to do that, and like and say, hey, you're just getting excited. Just, maintain your excitement. Don't
So
go crazy with
excited.
it. Yeah, yeah. Keep your excitement in check, man. And then it went much better. And yeah, I think to kind of put it into perspective, like how much better it went. I think the first attempt it took the full hour. The second one I finished in half an hour, and
Wow.
it like cut the time in half. It flowed like so smoothly. And I remember checking the time after. I was like, oh wow. I was like, crazy. I can't believe we're already done. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's really just, changing my mindset, sticking to my guns, like knowing like I have the skills, rely on those skills, and yeah, just try and take the pressure off yourself because yeah, putting having that pressure on, I think it's gonna do more bad than good.
It's almost an illustration of why we have the interviews, because it seems like, technically speaking, you could have gone through the entirety of the core curriculum with no issues, right? Like the not yet happened because of this, being put on the spot, like time to perform issue. So you could have gone through, if we didn't have these interviews, um, perfectly fine. But at the end, when you try and get a job, that's when when this would have happened, this issue of
Mm.
like freezing, and, kind of bombing it in a way. So
Mhm.
now I think and are still working on, like, you're soon going to have another technical interview. So it's working on those skills that are going to be able to make it so that not only do you have the technical skills, but that you can perform under pressure, when it's not just a grade, but also like a job, your livelihood in a
Mm.
sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And I'm really thankful that launch school does it this way because I feel like it is preparing me for that situation. When it comes time for a technical interview, going for a job, I'd rather bomb now than bomb that. So, that's
Mhm.
not to say, bombing's not a possibility when that time comes, but, hopefully I won't bomb as bad, you know, and,
It's less of
have
a
recover.
chance.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I am really thankful for it. And I really do enjoy the challenge. And, since then, other technical interviews have gone very, very well. I've been tackling them the same way. So, I thought of it as a learning experience as opposed to a setback. And I encourage anyone else who gets not yet to treat it the same way. You know, it sucks. Just learn from it, pick yourself back up and get back at it and go crush that thing.
Yeah. Something that struck me was that you reached out to other people. I think sometimes people will end up a bit isolated, especially because there's a bit of shame around a not yet for some people. I mean, there shouldn't be, right? But that's how people feel. So they kind of will end up like sitting in a corner and spiraling about, like, oh, this isn't for me. I'm not meant to be an engineer. What am I doing here? And it just gets worse and worse and worse until they've kind of
Hmm.
convinced themselves that this is the sign that they aren't meant to do this. So I think it's really important that you reached out to your peers, you chatted with JD and kind of just put it out there to get some support from the other people who know you, who have seen you coding and communicating and have faith in you and can, make you not feel so isolated and keep you out of that like loop, that spiraling the drain of doom that happens after something like a not yet.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm so thankful to, all the people I've met here at Launch School so far. Like I said, I've made a lot of great friends here, and then I hope to maintain those relationships. Even once we're off their core and capstone, and establish ourselves in our careers. So shout out to all of them. AJS through Trisha, Cruz, Matisse, all you guys are fantastic. Um, I think for new students, I can't say enough about trying to reach out and make those connections with your peers. It's going to help you so much. You know, it's helped me a bunch. I think that's probably one of the biggest things for that's contributed to my success so far. Um, so yeah, reach out to people, make friends, make study buddies, keep in touch, even if like you advance past them or they advance past you. You know, it's just yeah, I can't say enough of how important it is, and it's only going to benefit you.
hmm And this is something that you started at launch school. I get the feeling you said you weren't a great student. So I don't imagine that in your previous education, you were like scheduling study sessions with big groups of people and,
Mhm.
being kind of like a leader on the scene. So this is all new to you, right?
Definitely, yeah, yeah. I wasn't a great student in university, and that probably stems back from like to high school. Um, I don't know. I used to feel like for lack of a better word, I felt dumb. Like I just wasn't a very smart person,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a lot of that has to do with I just don't do well with the teaching style in most of the university courses. There was one course in particular that I excelled at, or sorry, I shouldn't say one course in particular. It was courses taught by a specific professor, um, Mr. Brandenburg. I can't remember his first name, but his teaching style really resonated with me. It wasn't just throwing up the slides on the projector, going through them, and having us read the textbook in our downtime. He set us up in groups. He had us chat with our groups about the stuff we were learning about, go through all these group exercises. And it actually, like when I think about it, it reminds me a lot of spot sessions. And I
Mm-hmm.
excelled in his classes in particular because I felt like I learned much, much better in those settings. And I think about that now. It's like, wow, why couldn't I have treated every single course like that? But yeah, it's just yeah, for whatever reason. So stepping back to high school, I had a couple teachers who made me feel like I just, wasn't that smart. And then those feelings, I just kind of bought into them and turned out to not be a very great student, didn't have great study habits, didn't have much self-discipline in that area. And I thought when I started law school it was gonna be more of the same, but I really challenged myself to change that and change my mindset. And I still don't feel like I'm the smartest guy around, but obviously have enough skills to make it this far. So, um, yeah, it's like I said, it's been very fun. It's been a wild ride.
Yeah, I think that everyone at launch school, at least that I know of, whether or not they get a not yet, whether or not they, you know, succeed to the fullest extent that they think they can, I think everyone here deals with at some point having those feelings of like, oh, I'm dumb. And
Mm.
it's the nature of learning something that's really difficult. But it's good to have a plan and it's good to have people to lean on.
Mhm. I didn't know much about imposter syndrome until I started doing the smooth start leads. And once I found out what it was, like, oh, wow, I definitely, suffered from that. And then it was even more surprising how many other people also suffered from that because, I just automatically assume every person I've met here at law school, like, oh, these is getting into software engineering, they must be smart. And then just to hear that from people like who have felt that same way, who I consider very bright and intelligent, it's like, okay, um, it's not abnormal to feel this way.
Yeah, that's great. I wanted to talk about that because you went from, getting a not yet to being a spot session lead and even a smooth start lead, which is kind of like even a step above that. What inspired you to become a spot lead and, why did you do that and how was that experience?
Yeah. So what kind of inspired me was, having all the great spot leads who were there for me as I went through 101, or I guess 101D. Like I said, spot sessions really, really helped me learn and help develop my understanding and help my preparation um, for the written and the interview assessments. And, I thought it was just so cool that, these were people who were further ahead. They're volunteering their time to help us, work through it and help us develop our understanding. And you know what I thought was like, all right, I want to give back to the law school community who's already done so much for me. Let me give it a shot. If I can help out people the way I've been helped out, that would be, insanely gratifying. And it has been. I think one of the most gratifying things I've experienced so far here at launch school is getting a message from someone, who attended a spot session saying, hey, thank you so much. I really felt great about that. Or, I passed my assessment and, your spot sessions really, really helped. Hearing things like that, it just like gives you that warm, fuzzy feeling inside. And it's super cool because I never imagined myself in that sort of position. Um, yeah, so that's what kind of inspired me. Everyone who'd done it for me, I wanted to give back to the community. And if someone could do it for me, I want to do it for someone else.
Right. I think it's good for people to realize as new students that the imposter syndrome and everything that them as a new student who's nervous and, a bit panicky and not sure if this is for them, that, the Nick Perry who's like leading their spot session and seems so confident and oh my gosh, he knows everything about Ruby, you know, you were them, It's cool to share so that people can relate to you and see that we're all just normal people, totally not confident that we're in the right place or that we can do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm, yeah. So anyone who's ever felt that way, you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it.
If I can do it, you can do it. Okay, that's all great. Do you have any advice for folks? I mean, I know we've talked about a lot today, but do you have any other, tips or tricks or whatever for people who might just be feeling really nervous or overwhelmed or dealing with, imposter syndrome or anything, especially in those first few courses?
Yeah. Take it day by day. Don't for me, what's really helped is not trying to think so far into the future and just take it day by day and, set small but easily attainable goals. So for me, it's like, I'm going to study. If it's a busier day, I'm going to try and study for an hour at least. Or if I know I can have a bit more time, all right, let's shoot for 2 to 3 hours. And just kind of taking it day by day like that. Um, as for dealing with imposter syndrome, I think building up your support network is really, really important, and being able to lean on them is really, really important. Don't be ashamed of struggling. We all struggle. And so if you can find a bunch of people you can connect with, that you can talk about these things with, and maybe not even talk about them, but just, hang out with them while you study, just to kind of pick yourself up and, pick up the mood. I think that helps as well. I always feel fantastic, hanging out with other students. Even if we're just silently studying together, I feel like it helps me focus. I don't feel so alone. So,
Mhm.
and I know that's kind of one of the struggles with like an online medium, is that sense of
Mhm.
loneliness. But no,
Mhm.
you can fill that void. You can, there's video calls. I mean, I'm used to this sort of thing. I'm a big online gamer, so I'm used to just being in voice chat with people, and and you know, that's kind of like our medium of being able to connect with each other. So it's if it's different to you, it might be a little bit tougher, I guess. But how to make those connections, that's probably my best advice. Build that support
Mhm.
network, make study buddies, meet up with them on a regular basis, even if it's just like once or twice a week, even if it's like once a month, whatever you can,
Mhm.
fit into your schedule. Um, yeah, that's, like I said, that's probably the biggest contributor to my success so far is building and maintaining those
Nice.
relationships.
Mhm. People always want to know, how do you know if you're ready for an assessment? Everyone has different metrics. What do you use?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I've actually been trying to gauge how I'm ready for this assessment because I've done live coding practice. Um, I've done tons of practice problems. I've gone through the course material a bunch, and I think how I'm gauging it for this one is like, okay, every time I study, it's starting to feel boring because it's like I'm not going over anything new. I understand everything. I feel well prepared. I don't like. Yeah, I shouldn't. Not to sound like there's nothing more to learn. It's just like I feel like I've prepared for everything within the context of the study guide.
Mhm.
And so at this point, I would feel ready. Now, prior to that, for different written assessments and things like that, generally what I'll do is I'll go through the study guide, and I'll go through each bullet point, and I'll try and actively recall as much as I can about each topic, and then go back into my notes and see, okay, what did I miss? And
Mhm.
then whatever I missed, I'll jot that down on a separate page, and then review, go through my flashcards, read notes, do more practice problems, things like that, study with others. And then maybe like a week later, come back to that bullet point. Okay, how much can I actively recall now? Fill it back out. Hopefully, hopefully it's more. And then again, compare it to what I missed. Okay, I didn't miss anything this time. Okay, now how is it for each other bullet point? And I try and get to a point where I can actively recall as much as I can to a point where I feel like, okay, I feel super comfortable with my knowledge at this point. I feel like there's not much more I could do to prepare. Let's go ahead and take it.
Mhm.
That's kind of how I prepare for it. Yeah, it's just I guess it's just waiting for that feeling of I don't know what else I can do to prepare for this. I feel like if I just keep reviewing, I've hit the point of such low diminishing returns that more and more reviews not going to do much for me. Time to take it and see what happens. And so far, so good.
Yeah. It's interesting how many people, their first metric is boredom. And I think that's hard to imagine at the beginning of the curriculum. I don't think it's something that most of us used for those first couple of courses, maybe. But as you go on, you become more calibrated with what's expected of you and more calibrated with how the study guide reflects the actual assessment and, what level of detail you're expected to know from the curriculum. So it's like in the beginning, you do whatever you can. And then as you go on and on, just the feeling of boredom is almost enough to tell you that you're ready for an assessment.
Yeah, I agree. And saying it out loud, it sounds terrible. Studying becoming boring because some people studying might be boring as it is. For me personally, like I love it. I love learning about this stuff, and it's it's funny. It's such a contrast to how I felt in university, learning about, biology and physiology and things like that. That stuff bored me to death.
Mm,
This stuff, it's exciting. I love learning about it. So when I get to that point of boredom, being like, okay, like I'm bored studying this stuff. I've reviewed it so much. That's when I'm like,
mhm,
okay, I feel pretty good. Obviously, it's a little bit, there's a bit more nuance to that. Again, being able to actively recall and gauging my understanding and how well I can talk about these things. And actually, that's probably another good point as well. Is if you can talk about the concepts in a very fluid manner with precision of language to someone else, and almost like teach them about it. I think that is a pretty good way to gauge how prepared you are. Because if you can teach it, I think that displays a pretty uh, good mastery of the material. So
mm,
if you can, even be another student, it could be a friend, it could be your partner, whoever, say, hey, can I borrow, 20, 30 minutes of your time? Or, 10, 15 minutes if you're just explaining, a short concept, whatever else. Let me talk about this to you. Obviously, someone who understands material as well might be a little bit better because they can give you feedback, on how well you're able to talk about it. But yeah, in general, if you can talk about these concepts and talk about it well, then yeah, I think you're in a
mhm.
pretty good spot. I think writing articles about it as well. That's not too much for me. It's not something I've done. I'm not much of a writer, uh,
Mhm.
so um, but yeah, if you can do either of those things, I think it's a pretty good indication that you're ready.
Yeah. Are you planning on doing capstone?
I am, yes.
Yeah, that's the plan. Do you have any ideas about,
Mhm.
like, what you wanna get into? I think a lot of people don't, but since you're a gamer, I'm just curious if you have any. I mean, your hobby is in software, right? Do you, like, want to get into, software with, like, some gaming?
I think that would be pretty cool. I also think it'd be something maybe I'd like to keep separate. I don't know. I
Right.
mean, it's still quite further along. Um, I think something that's kind of stood out to me is dealing with performance. How well
Mm,
code performs and how improving performance of an
mhm,
app. So I had the opportunity to sit down with a friend of mine and see what his life was like on the job, day to day. So I
mhm,
got to hang out with him, got to see what he did on his laptop, and he works for a company called Square, and he primarily deals with improving the performance of the different apps they have. So
mhm,
I think they have like a restaurant app, POS app, and every time a new version of the software comes out, performance can change, things can slow down, and part of his job is to identify where those poor performance issues are coming from and fixing them. And seeing he gave me kind of an example of how he does it or some of the things that can contribute to it, and seeing him go about, like, I guess, fixing it in a sense, was really really cool, and it seemed just like a giant puzzle piece to me. And he was showing me like all the different tools he had at his disposal, how he would go about doing it. All right, let's check for this. Okay, that's not it. Let's kind of go down the chain. And I was like, that's really really interesting, and it looks really really fun. So maybe something like that. But
mhm.
other than that, I
You're
can't
open.
really think of. Yeah, I'm open to whatever. Just one of those things that you
Yeah.
put me in, coach. I'll do whatever. Um,
Mhm.
all of it sounds pretty fun at this point.
Right. Um, awesome. Well, I think it's great to hear from someone, especially someone who didn't really consider themselves a good student in, a traditional setting, because we definitely have a lot of capstone grads and students who are transitioning, maybe from a different tech sector or, a profession that's, somewhat adjacent to software. So I think sometimes people think that that's the standard, but we definitely also have people who, weren't the best students or didn't really enjoy university or didn't even go to university. So it's nice to get perspective from someone who came from somewhere where they were like, oh, I don't really enjoy school, and to now is a spot lead and a smooth start lead. And, I think an inspiration for a lot of students who are just starting out at launch school.
Yeah, yeah. I know when I first started, and hearing about like, all these different capstone grads and hearing about their backgrounds, and some of them had, like PhDs in other areas, they had their masters in other areas. I was like, well, I definitely don't have that. So it's like, at the beginning it was really tough to imagine myself in this position that the capstone would even be an option. And now, a year and a half later, where it certainly seems attainable. I'm still not
Mhm.
quite there yet. I still got a couple of courses to go, but um, it's just really crazy to me that year and a half ago, like, I didn't know if I can do this, and now a year and a half later, it's like, oh well, you can, and looks like you're going to. So keep
Mhm.
pushing.
Totally. Yeah, keep it up. You're creeping up on Nick the engineer, which is really cool. I think it's crazy for students to think about that. You're getting close, so I can't wait to see where you go. I'm sure it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see what you do, and I hope the rest of core goes well for you. I hope you get to participate in capstone and that you find your dream job.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Yeah, the I never thought I'd be referred to as an engineer outside of video games. So thinking about that, it's like, all right, that's pretty cool. I think I could live with that.
Yeah, right. Awesome. Thanks for sharing your time today, Nick. Thanks for being really open about getting a not yet and being willing to share your story.
Oh, much appreciated. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. This was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Okay, great. Okay, bye.
Bye.